Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hi there. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I've got a really great guest for you today. April Stroink is my friend and a money coach and advisor for individuals and entrepreneurs who are seeking clarity, ease, and abundance with their finances. In her 20 plus years of guiding people on how to spend and save their money, she's discovered the right tools to create that financial ease and calm, and has a real passion for sharing these systems with other people to help them calm their financial chaos. So we had a really, really great conversation about a whole variety of topics that are directly relevant to women and money. And I think you're going to find this a really enlightening conversation. You're going to learn a lot, and hopefully it will get you thinking about your own relationship with money and whether there are some changes that you could make there that would actually serve you significantly, not just in terms of your financial wellness, but your physical wellness and your mental health, because we talk about how all of these things are connected in this episode. So without further ado, here is my interview with my friend and money coach, April Stroink. Hi, April. So great to have you here.
Hey, Wendy. Good to see you.
I'm so glad you're here. We've been talking about doing this for a long time and it just hasn't happened yet. So this podcast episode is going to air in season 3 of Bite Size Balance. I can't believe I'm recording season 3. It feels crazy to me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we're going to talk about something that we haven't actually talked about at all on this podcast, which is money wellness and how your relationship with money, especially as a woman in midlife, ties into burnout, to mental health, to physical health, and into your values and fulfillment and all of these big topics that I talk a lot about on this podcast, but have never specifically connected to money. So I'm really excited for this conversation.
Me too.
Okay. So let's start out with this. Like, we've known each other for a long time. So let's just talk about, like, I already introduced you really briefly, but let's talk about who you are and how we know each other. I feel like we must have met. I can't actually remember. I'm the worst for this, but I feel like we must have connected somehow through some female entrepreneur group down like 10 years ago. That's my guess.
Yes, it was definitely 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I also don't, it had to be, I don't know if it was Julie L'Esperance or if it was.
Shout out to Julie. Shout out to our friend Julie. I don't know who it was either. Someone connected us. I think it might've just been through, I don't know. Anyway, we ended up, our paths crossed. We talked a few times. We ended up doing some cross marketing. At the time you were doing fitness and I think mostly fitness related programming, right?
Mm-hmm, correct.
And then we actually ran a program called Reboot together a few times where I did the food side of it. You did the fitness side of it. That was pretty fun. And then you at some point started shifting more into the money side of things, the financial side of things in terms of supporting women. And well, I guess you support women and men, but we're talking to women today. So in terms of supporting people, and then eventually started doing that full time. So can you tell people, just maybe go back, because your story around this is really interesting, I think, as a business person and as a busy mom. How did you get to that place where you started supporting other people around their own financial wellness?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm going to back up the bus even further, if that's okay. So I started in financial services in 1999, and I was classically trained, if you will, as a financial advisor, and eventually was in the position where I was leading a regional team and traveling and on the road all of the time. And at the time I had 2 young children. And sort of the impetus for me of, I've got to change my life. I was already feeling a big hole in my heart for what I was doing. I wasn't really I didn't have a passion for it. And I really didn't believe, if you will, in what I was doing anymore. I think a lot of women get to this sort of point where, what am I doing with my life? And this is not fulfilling. And my daughter's primary teacher actually called home and said my daughter was crying because I was always in Moncton. I don't know why she chose Moncton. Moncton wasn't part of my territory, but anyway, I was always in Moncton. Interestingly, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't call the dad about that, but she called a mom. And I was sort of thinking, like, what am I doing? I'm dropping my kids off at daycare early in the morning, picking them up late at night, missing Christmas concerts, missing all of the things of the reason why I was a mom in the first place. And so I just made this decision that I wasn't going to do this anymore. I wanted to be a present mother in my children's life, because my oldest is going off to university this year, and it goes fast. And so I spent some time sort of soul searching in regards to that. And I realized, I started to do the math of what did I need to sock away in order to take a year off to find myself, but to really be with my kids. And so I did the calculation, and I figured out how much I needed to do in additional sales plus my salary and what have you. But what I really discovered, Wendy, when I was doing that deep dive into my own finances, was that I was spending on clothing and going to the spa and all of these places to try and fill this hole in my heart that I had. And what it was doing was just taking me further and further away from what it was that I wanted, which was to be with my kids. And so I really, like cold turkey, stopped the spending on shopping, stopped the spending on the spas, the skincare, and all these things that I really just didn't need. I was just miserable, and I was trying to make myself feel better. And so very quickly, I actually amassed this amount and walked into my regional director's office and quit. And it was like, I think I skipped all the way back to my office from seeing him, and then took that year off to be with the kids. And then what I realized was, like, this was really great, but being the class parent and reading to kids and what have you wasn't actually filling my cup either. And I also wanted my kids to see me making an impact in the world too. I think it was important for my girls. And so that's when I started to say, okay, what are the things that I'm really interested in? I've always been interested in fitness. So went down that path, met up with you. And at the same time, my husband and I owned a family business together, and he went off to do his passion project. And then I, as a result, went into the family business. And so sort of, again, had to put my dreams on pause, but also realized I wasn't going to be making the money, or I wanted to not doing that either. And then once I got into the family business, I started to realize, holy smokes, we have got some money chaos happening here that I wasn't aware of. And that's a big, long story. But what I realized is that I've got to take these same principles that I learned in personal finance and start to apply them into the business as well. And beyond balance sheet, profit and loss, the mechanics of money, but also the entrepreneurial mindset that we had both bought into as well, of pay yourself last, everybody else gets paid, burn yourself out. And so I realized after doing that for 5 years, this was not my jam either. And use the principles that I teach, and got it to a place that we sold everything off. And so when we sold everything in 2017, sort of searching of what is this next, I realized I love the financial world, and everything that I have done, whether it's leave corporate to be home and how I did that, and also what we did to make sure that we had a business that we could sell. There's got to be other people that are interested in this as well. And so I didn't want to go back to doing what I was doing before, because I really felt that as a financial advisor, we were getting people to retirement and making sure they had their safety net, but we weren't talking about the day-to-day. There's lots of people that they're making really good money and maybe have a pension or socked away for retirement, but they're actually living paycheck to paycheck and incurring debt that they just can't eradicate. And the stress of that is impacting both their mental and physical health. But money stress is the number one reason for divorce and relationship breakdown in this country as well. And so along the way, I met Wendy Brookhouse, who was at that time doing the one number solution. And so she did the program with me, and it worked so well because, again, at that point, I was without a job. And then 6 months later, my husband was without a job, and we were in a tailspin. And so financially, so really took what Wendy had taught me and realized I got to just keep working the system. If I work the system, it will bring peace and calm, and I will get myself through this. And we as a relationship will get ourselves through this. And it did. And so then again, I was like, I've got to give this to other people and get this out there, because there's got to be other people that are in the same situation that I was found myself in too. And so fast forward, I really started to zero down on financial. I'm like you, Wendy, I'm a constant learner and like to get as much education as possible. So really started to learn about behavioral finance. And behavioral finance, again, was so different than my background of the mechanics of how money works. And I realized that when we can marry the two together, we can really get to our financial goals. And again, it works so well for us. And so that's led me to the journey of, flash forward 5 years into it today. And I've helped thousands of couples and business owners level up with their money just by aligning, okay, that whole awareness and mindset around money with the mechanics of how money works as well.
That's so fascinating. As you were talking, I was thinking, wow, it's so weird how I've never really reflected on it before, but how completely in sync we were in terms of the timing of us going through these stages, which is interesting because I think you and I are very close in age, but I think you're younger than me, but not that much younger than me.
I'm 49.
Oh yeah. You're just, I'm 50. So there we go. Although I'm almost 51, I should just be saying, I feel like now I'm at that point where I should just be saying I'm 51. Anyway, it's interesting to me when I listen to your timeline, how similar that is to mine, and how we both went through that period of okay, want to be home with my kids. So that was me after I left the practice of law, which was not resonant. My corporate life, similar to yours, wasn't lighting me up, was pretty miserable. I would say spending then was definitely also partly happening to fill a void for me. I mean, it was like, well, what else am I doing this for? If I can't buy all these things, but none of those things were filling the void. At that point, my drinking really wasn't problematic for me. I was definitely beginning to drink to escape, but it hadn't become something that I was really worried about or thinking about much. But I could see how spending was kind of doing that at that point in time. And then I also took a year off to be home with my kids because I wanted to be able to be there for them after school. I wanted to be able to go volunteer in the class. I wanted to be able to do Valentine's cards with them and all of these things. And I too was like, ooh, this is not enough. I am not actually enjoying this in the way that I hoped I would enjoy it. And it's not that I didn't love spending time with my kids. It was just, I needed something more than that. Mm-hmm. And then I went through my 30s, my sort of the second half of my 30s, beginning of my 40s, trying to figure out what the hell that was. And did the same thing. And when you and I were doing that program together, I was doing the food coaching and you were doing the fitness coaching, and neither one of us was really doing exactly what we wanted to be doing. We hadn't quite found our thing yet. And then I think as you were moving into the financial stuff, I was moving into burnout and life coaching for professional women, which is really what I love to do. And then also making changes around my own relationship with alcohol, which led to the alcohol coaching certification. And now I really feel like I'm in that space where I'm doing what I want to do. And of course, as I've said 1,000 times on this podcast before, people are tired of listening to me talk about writing, but writing has really filled this literally whole hole, this big hole, that was there that I didn't realize that was there around creativity for me. So, it's just all really interesting as you're talking. I feel like we're going to have such a fascinating conversation about the connection between money and spending and our overall wellness, and also with midlife for women, and how these themes are all, my guess is pretty universal. So thanks for sharing all of that. I think it's just so fascinating how you got to where you got to. And just for everyone listening, I've worked with April when April was first doing the more, I guess, personal we were more working, I think, with couples and individuals, doing less business stuff in the early days. I think when you were doing that, my husband and I did a little experiment with you around budgeting and finances and spending. And it involved us going onto a cash system for a period of time, which was just like a huge eye opener for me. Absolutely. I loved it. As you know, I was all like into it. I gamified it. I was trying to save as much money as I could. It was so interesting to me as a human, but also as a coach, how differently I thought about money, how quickly that shifted my lens and my perspective, actually physically having the money in front of me instead of just having it all be virtual in an electronic form, which was just so uninteresting and unexciting and unmotivating for me. So I have worked with April. It was a really great experience. And then April has moved into also doing a lot of like small business coaching and entrepreneur coaching around money and finances. And I've worked with her in that respect as well. And she's supported some of my clients around that. So we have a long history of doing stuff together.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. I'm remembering one time we did, I feel like we did like a school lunches live, something or other for your, like, oh man, we've done a lot of stuff together. Anyway, can we talk about some of the most common mindsets or limiting beliefs, or just kind of limiting, I don't know what to call them, but perspectives maybe that women get stuck in around money? Because I can think of some of my own. I mean, I basically am like, I don't want to know. That's kind of my mindset. I'm like, if I can't see it and I don't have to, like, I'm just put my blinders on, because I was raised, and I think I see this a lot with women, not all women. And thank God it's changing. I think, my daughter's going into sciences. I don't know what's your daughter doing at university?
So she's taking her Juris Doctorate.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what I have noticed is that girls are less likely to fall into the default that I fell into, which was you're good at English and you're not good at math. So I had that in my brain my whole life. I'm not good at math. I'm not good at numbers. I can't handle the financial stuff. I can't figure it out. I remember doing legal accounting in law school and being like, oh, sweet Jesus, I can never work for myself because I never want to have responsibility for this. Right. So for me, that was there's a real limiting mindset around my ability to actually comprehend and understand financial stuff. But I wonder what other ones you see out there. Like, what are the most common things that keep women stuck in a relationship that doesn't serve them with money?
It's our perfectionism, our tendency towards it's got to be perfect before I launch. And a lot of women get stuck in that money equals math. And I have to understand the math behind money before I invest, before I look at anything financial. And so it really comes down to this confidence factor of it's actually, you don't have to know all the nuts and bolts of finance to enter into the finance world. Right. If you take a look at money, it's emotional more than it is the mechanics of how it all works. And yet I find, especially women business owners, they'll just hoard money in their business instead of reinvesting in themselves or reinvesting in assets. They'll delay getting into the stock market because they feel like, why should I need to read everything before I do. And what we know to be true is that women actually make better investors because they will stick to a plan. So mostly our male counterparts, if they're investing, they'll get into the crypto, and then we see what's happening with crypto right now, and they'll lose money and what have you. And so women in general are less risk takers, and we want to know before we jump in the pool. And so when it comes to, especially on the investing side, it's time in the market, not market timing. Right. And so what I see is a lot of women get behind the 8 ball because they want to make sure that they understand and know everything. And yeah, absolutely, you got to be comfortable with what you are investing in, but you need to start looking at that and investing in yourselves. And I think we just have this limiting belief about investing in ourselves. Who am I to be investing in myself? Yeah. I should be investing in my children or my household or what have you. Yeah. And so it really comes down to, it's very interesting because I still do one-on-one work, because if I'm working with a business owner, we actually start with the one-on-one, because you can't tell me that your story, your money story in your business is not similar to your money story in your personal life.
Sure.
So we always start with your personal life and say, okay, how much do you actually have to be paying yourself on a regular basis from your business to run your financial dreams? So I always start on the individual side. And so what I find is that the woman will always come in for the discovery call and talk to me, and then sells it to her husband, brings her husband into it. And then it's always the husband that grabs a hold of the program and then really runs with it as well. So it's very interesting, the psychology still of money. I'm finding more women are becoming the CFOs in their household, but more on the day-to-day. They're still giving over the reins to their partner when it comes to investing in the long term.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they don't even know what they're invested in. They don't know how much insurance they have. And you're kind of a sitting duck when you advocate that to others, because chances are you're going to outlive your partner. That's statistically what we're looking at. And if you aren't taking control of what is going to happen to your financial future, you could be leaving yourself open for not having enough insurance, not having enough investments, if you're not understanding your entire financial picture.
Yeah.
And it's really this whole confidence and this whole limiting belief of, I need to understand all the nuts and bolts of it before I can get into it. Or just, I hear this so much, Wendy, of, oh, I'm really bad with money, or people have told me I'm bad with money.
Right.
And, for women, we're supposed to be the shoppers, the ones buying shoes and hiding in their closet from our husbands. And that's what we've been like passed down to us. And same thing, we don't go into math, we don't go into finance. I was the only woman on the senior management team for many, many years. And I don't even want to get into what has been said to me over the years in that industry. Is still very, very much male dominated and very intimidating. And so I think we've always just been intimidated with this money story.
Yeah, this is so great. I'm having my own light bulb moments as you're talking, because I'm 100% guilty as charged with everything you're saying, by the way. So you're talking about women hoarding money in their business. That's me. I don't spend it. I also don't do a lot with it. I do pay myself every month, so that's good. But I am like, that's something I struggle with. I have a serious money scarcity mindset that keeps, at least I'm aware of it, and I do get coaching on it, and I'm working through it, and it's getting better, but it's definitely there. It's definitely keeping me stuck. And I definitely I'm hands off when it comes to investments in terms of the personal side of things and our money. My husband happens to be really good at that, and he really enjoys it. And I would say that what's happened over the last couple of years is I've realized exactly what you said, not so much that I might outlive him, but more like, hello, like what happens if something happens here? Like, do you even know where this stuff is? I've had that conversation with him. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like if you get hit by a bus and you can't talk tomorrow, I don't know where to go. Like, I don't know what to do, so we've had those discussions, but as you're talking, I'm getting annoyed and angry with myself, which always happens on this podcast for me. And I always at some point mention the patriarchy, which I'm going to mention again now, because I'm like a born again feminist, I think, in that I repressed it and resisted it for a long time, because for a long time I thought, well, I'm just being a feminist by taking the actions that I take. So by living the life I live and by doing the job I do and by all of, then somehow that's enough. And now I'm kind of angry. So I tend to call it the patriarchy, but I'm thinking, well, I'm just contributing to this here by not actually taking more of being more active in terms of the management of all of this stuff and actually like getting involved and learning more about this. And also, as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, these are just stories, like all the stories, right? So you do coaching, I do coaching, we deal with stories. That's our life, right? What is the story that I'm telling myself? And is it even true? Is it even my story? And I think for a lot of women, the stories that we have around money are not even our stories. They're the stories of our mothers or grandmothers or, other people in our lives. They're not our stories. And even if they are our stories, and this is the thing I'm most passionate about, even if they are our stories, we can always change them.
Exactly.
And so the first step in all of it is this awareness piece. And I'm having a bit of that right now where I'm thinking, okay, hold on, like this is an area of my life where I need to take back a little bit of power and sort of step into it a little bit more and trust myself a little more and get a little more educated. Because I definitely have a story around this. And it's rooted in all of that stuff. I was just talking about the whole math, being bad at math, being not necessarily being bad with money, because I've never been someone who's been irresponsible with money. That hasn't been part of my history, but definitely the not knowing very much about it and just being hands off and, no, I'll just let Rob deal with that. So it's really interesting, like these parallels in terms of the stories and how they play out in all areas of our lives, because I can take everything you just said there about money and women's money mindsets and apply it to women's wellness and balance and the career stuff I coach around. It's all really similar.
Absolutely. Like, love it or hate it, money is interwoven into all of it, into your well-being. Money stress, like financial well-being is a marker of overall health. Money stress contributes to unwellness physically, mentally. As I said, it's the number one reason for relationship breakdown. We'll actually accept someone cheating on us versus someone financially cheating on us. And so there's lots of intertwining in this. And it's also been just a place that women have been shut out of for far too long.
Yeah.
I strongly believe that if women step into their power around money, we would live in a different world, because every time you buy something, you are casting a vote for the world that you live in. So if you want women to be in C-suites or on boards, then spend your money and support companies that support equality for women. Like just what I see happening right now in south of the border, those businesses that have stood up and said, if a woman wants to choose her reproductive health as a business, we will support them. As women, we should be buying from those companies, right? Patagonia, the entire organization walked out yesterday. Who am I going to support? Patagonia, right? Like we don't realize that every time we buy, every time we shop on Amazon or go to the mall, you are actually casting a vote for the world that you want to live in. And so I think as women, we can naturally understand that, but I think we need to make that connection of let's support those companies that support women, the environment, don't have children working in their sweatshops. Like we always think we're so powerless with money. We're absolutely not.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And that is a conversation. It's so interesting how all of these, again, can be translated over into other areas. And you've probably heard me say that about food, like the whole food industry and how you vote with your fork 3 times a day. And when you go to the grocery store, someone's paying attention to what you're purchasing. And, in terms of supporting organic farmers, more natural farming and less, maybe less GMO and all of that stuff. So this is all really fascinating to me. And I'm also thinking, as you're talking, not only our choices around our spending impacting and influencing the world, the bigger global context in the world, but we're also making a decision. We're also voting every time we spend on our future and our freedom and how fast we get there. And that's the piece that you and I were chatting about pre-interview. And I thought, this is going to be such a great part of this conversation, because obviously I'm a burnout coach. I work mostly with women who are burnt out and using alcohol as their primary coping mechanism, but sometimes they're also using food. And a lot of the time they're also using shopping as a way to escape and to feel better. And, I very often see more than one of these coping mechanisms tying in together. And I think most women are at some point in their lives, at least, I don't want to use the word guilty, because I think we get sold. This is something we get sold by. It is marketing, right? Like we get told that I think Glennon Doyle's famous thing is like, they told me if I bought those countertops, then I'd be happy, And so I think this is our what we're being told like constantly all day long. I mean, we're just being bombarded with the message that if we just have this thing, it's somehow going to make us happy. So it's not our fault that we do this. But I think so many of us get into this pattern where that becomes almost our escape and our coping mechanism. And so you and I were talking about the connection between going alcohol free. So getting free from alcohol, or becoming sober, if you want to use the sober word, which is not one that I normally use, but like getting to that place where alcohol is small and irrelevant and you've taken back control over it, and taking back some control over your financial wellness, and how there's such a parallel between those two paths. Do you want to explain what it was you were saying to me about that before we hit record?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the marketers have a term for it, right? It's called retail therapy.
Yeah.
And so as much as people like me study behavioral finance, these big companies are spending millions of dollars on behavioral finance. Why do you think Jeff Bezos spent millions of dollars on the one click for Amazon? It's because he studied human behavior to know that of all the trillions of dollars in abandoned carts, the reason is because people had time to think about their purchases. Now you've got the one click, you don't think about it, you get that instant gratification. And so it's this vicious circle of, we have this void and we don't know what that void, how to fill that void. And so we fill it with stuff that the world has told us we will be happy with. It's kind of like that study that they did of people who won the lottery, and within X amount of years, they had it all spent and they weren't any happier, because if you're not happy before you have money, you're usually not going to be happy when you have money too. And we just talked about the Princeton study about after a certain amount of income, your happiness doesn't actually go up.
Yeah. Let's just stop on that for one sec, just so we can tell people what we were talking about. So when I do a presentation a lot in the corporate context, it's called the joy factor. And it really talk about how to increase your daily joy. So you don't need to change your life. You don't need to switch careers. You don't need to leave your husband. There are ways to actually improve the quality of your everyday days. And one of the things I talk about always in that presentation is this study that came out of Princeton. And it's pretty old, I think now. I should go back and look at the date on it. But in that study, what they said is that there's a threshold. So from $0 a year in income up to $75,000 a year in income, there is a correlation between the amount of money you make and your level of happiness. But once you hit that 75,000, after that, it doesn't matter how much more money you make, your happiness doesn't go up. So the idea is that there's this sort of benchmark that we need for financial security, and just, enough for us to be able to not be stressed out significantly about money. But then after that, additional money does not actually contribute to joy or happiness for us. So that's what April was referring to in terms of that study. And I just find that really eye-opening and enlightening, given the number of women who are working right now and making significantly more money than that, who I think still hold this belief that somehow that's going to solve their problems and make them happy.
Absolutely. I have this blog of what would you leave if money wasn't a factor?
Yeah.
Right. What would you leave? And I work with a lot of women who come and they say, can I do your program because I don't want to stay in this relationship. I'm staying with it because of money. I don't want to stay in this career, but I'm staying because of money. Yeah. And when I show them if they can, I'm all about balance as well. And I think you need to live for today but not spend your tomorrows. But right. When we can see that maybe if you have one less Amazon purchase or one less, that you could actually live the life that you want to live. And guess what? You have complete control over that. Right. That's the cool thing about this too. Like even with inflation and this possible recession and everything, and everybody's like, April, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just standing in my power. I'm pausing. I'm working the system. I can control my spending. I can just control what it is that I can control. Right. But we get into this vicious cycle again of all of this noise around us of buy. We're just this and grow. Like for the business owners, like, no, grow a company that you feel comfortable in the growth of. Don't like more. That's why we're in the state that the world is in. Right. And so when we really can connect our spending with our values, what we start to see is exactly what you were talking about, Wendy, is the dopamines that you had from spending now are the dopamines that you have from seeing that money accumulate in your bank account. Right. And now we got to take it to the next step of yes, you've got that money in your bank account. Now, how do we get that money to work for you so you're not always working for your money? But it's that first connection of what are my values and is it actually in line with how I'm spending?
Which is a conversation I have to go back to the sobriety thing. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to pull this thing together for the question that we were talking about is how a journey to becoming alcohol free, making alcohol small and irrelevant, and taking back your control and power over that is really very similar to this journey to financial empowerment for women. And this whole idea of getting your financial picture and your relationship with money in alignment with your values is something I talk about a lot around alcohol too, because when I'm coaching women who are still drinking, but who know that the status quo isn't serving them anymore, we often talk about that. I'll say, okay, do you have any idea what your personal values are? And frankly, most women don't. And that's totally okay. If you're listening and you're like, I have no idea. I didn't either. That's what coaching is all about. But we get to some clarity as to some of their personal values. And then I usually ask them the question right away, like, how is alcohol, how is your drinking making it easier for you to live a life in alignment with your values? And how is your relationship with alcohol making it impossible for you to live a life in alignment with your values? And it's almost always the latter, right? So for example, for me, one of my main values is authenticity and just being genuine, showing up as who I am, which is impossible if you're a drinker, because alcohol does the very opposite. Just the act of drinking takes you out of yourself. So, and then on top of it, for many of us, it involves like we're hiding things, like you were talking about hiding shoes in the closet, right? Like, hiding your purchases or hiding your drinking, like same thing, doesn't feel good. Right. And this whole idea of standing in your power, you're not standing in your power when you're spending all the time and feeling really guilty and having that same shame cycle and regret around it as lots of women have around their drinking. And then on top of it, the other parallels we were talking that I wanted to raise is this idea of the, big commercial kind of industry, whatever we call that. I don't know if we call like big shopping, but like that, is there a name for it? You know what I mean? Like we talk about big alcohol. I don't know what the same equivalent is in the material world.
Yeah. Big retail for sure.
Yeah. Big retail. So the parallels there are this like concept of retail therapy that is 100% sold to women. That is not sold to men. That is not being pushed on men, retail therapy. I think with men, it's more probably that you deserve it. You're so awesome. But with women, it's like, you need this to survive because you can't get by without this girl, right? And it's exactly the same thing with alcohol. With alcohol, it is, you need this to parent. In order to get through the day, you deserve a glass of mummy juice, right? You deserve this. You deserve to have your little champagne fridge in your bathroom so you can go in there and make yourself a mimosa when you're trying to homeschool during the pandemic. All this bullshit that goes on with marketing towards women is completely different than the marketing that goes on towards men around alcohol. And same thing with like big retail. So I'm getting angry at the patriarchy again, but I think there are so many parallels here in terms of all of this. And so when we're talking about coping mechanisms and the things that we do to try to escape and numb pain and fill the hole, there's such a similarity between shopping and drinking. And for a lot of women, eating, food, it's the same thing. It's just a different poison. It's like, pick your poison, but all of the underlying reasons why we get into trouble around these things are the same. And it's not our fault. I want to be really clear about that. But as soon as you become aware of it, so if you're listening to this podcast, you're starting to have some awareness, like, oh, wait, like I am, right? Like, man, I got to step more into this. Like, I don't have a lot of financial power. I need to step into that. Then that awareness is where it all starts for you. And that's how you actually create something better. So the awareness is really uncomfortable, but that's how you step into that power, is by having that moment where you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm not where I want to be with money, drinking, my relationship with food, social media, whatever your thing is that you use as your means of escaping or coping. Okay.
And then let's just talk about social media then for a second.
Yeah.
If that's your means of escaping, it's just fueling the fire of all of those vices that you just talked about. And especially with money, like I get people come in and they're like, my neighbor just went to Hawaii again, and they've got like an RV in the driveway. And I mean, I know what they do. And why can't I have that? Right. And I'm like, I'll tell you how they can have it. It's called LOC, line of credit, right?
Credit.
And it's just, this carefully curated of our best lives on social media. And then if you look behind the curtain, what you see is absolute panic right now with interest rates and everything going up. Like, we've been fed really cheap money for a very long time, and it can't go on forever. And so it's exactly the same parallels. That's why I said at the beginning, money doesn't equal math. It is emotional.
Yeah, 100%. It's so interesting to me as we're talking through all of this stuff. I want to get into this hole that we fill piece, which is a little different in some ways than using it as a way of numbing or escaping. Although sometimes we're using it as a way of numbing or escaping from the emptiness that we feel. But I think sometimes, I think I said this to you before we hit record on the podcast, in my opinion, burnout and an unhealthy relationship with alcohol for women, along with an unhealthy relationship with food and oftentimes money, as we're talking about, comes from a combination of two things that are happening for us, especially in midlife. So the women that I work with, it's a combination of overdoing. So just doing, never saying no, taking on way too much, having a bajillion responsibilities, which for women often end up just piling on naturally in our 30s and early 40s, because a lot of us have kids. So we're now caregiving for younger people. And then on top of that, our careers are growing. So we're having more and more responsibility at work oftentimes. And then for a lot of us, we're going through perimenopause and menopause, which throws a wrench into all of it. And then we also have sometimes the sandwich thing starting to happen, where we're actually having to take care of elderly, aging, ill parents, right? So all of this is happening and we're doing like crazy, and we're not taking any time to just be. So it's just all about the doing, which means, in my opinion, balance is whack, right? Because when I define balance, it's this balance between doing and being. That's all I'm really focused on. There's no like one right place of balance for anyone. This idea of like work-life balance is a thing you find and keep forever is just complete bullshit. But what is important is to be thinking about, like, how much time am I spending doing versus the time I'm spending just being and just doing things that I love to do, that pass the time, that feel amazing to me, whether that's connecting with other humans, being out in nature, exercising, sleeping, whatever, reading, the things that make me feel good. So the overdoing is one of the main, I think, drivers for this imbalance that causes us to reach for these things and to spend this money. But the other half of it that we're not talking about enough is the not doing enough of the things that we actually need to be doing to feel amazing. And oftentimes that's directly connected to living in alignment with our values, right? So the things that we need to be doing that just allow us to feel fantastic. So things that bring us joy and things that are, in alignment with the key core values that we have about what it means to be a good human. And so on the whole side of things, so the filling this whole piece, how do you see that play out for women? Because I was saying to you earlier that I really feel like I'm filling that hole. I mean, I'm not in any way done with personal growth, but I do think the last 5 years of my life have been monumental in terms of changes. So I let go of the things that were not serving me, my job in law, drinking, frankly, my bathroom scale. I let go of those three things, which were great. But then I'm working on also bringing in more things into my life that I need more of, including stepping into my business and really ramping it up and turning it into something I'm very proud of, taking more risks creatively, like this podcast, for example. But then the other main thing for me is the writing and spending time doing that and really owning that and getting excited about where that might go in the future. And then working on building more really meaningful relationships with women. Those are the three things I've needed to bring in to fill that hole. So better friendships, more creativity, and really stepping into my business. So, and what I was gonna, sorry, just to keep going here. I know I'm rambling on here, but it's all related to what you're talking about. What I've noticed is that I'm not spending. So it's just like interesting for me. I was just reflecting on it as we were talking, like, I'm really not spending in a way that I was spending even a few years ago, in that I'm not online looking for stuff. I'm not, I was telling you the story of the anthropology emails. Anthropology is my Achilles heel. Everyone who knows me knows that. And I've never met an Anthropologie store that I haven't loved and overloved. And so these email, whatever they are, like sales flyers come into my inbox every once in a while. And usually it leads to like a two hours down the rabbit hole of the Anthropologie website and 1,000 things in my cart, and I have to like cancel things out of my cart because I can't believe what my total is. And then eventually I end up spending way too much money on Anthropologie and ordering a bunch of stuff. And yesterday the email came in, I clicked, it was like automatic, it's one of those learn dopamine things. I'm like, oh, this is going to feel good. Let me click on this. And I end up in Anthropologie. And after it was probably not more than 5 minutes. It was like, what are you doing in here? You don't need or want any of this stuff and you have better things to do. And I legitimately was like, you have better things to do that will make you feel much better. That will actually, I wasn't, articulating this clearly in my head, but now I can see it. Things that are going to make you feel better, things that are going to provide you with some like legit dopamine and not cause you a bunch of pain, right? Including like getting out your laptop and working on that piece you're working on, or going and, doing some work in your business, or going for a walk outside, or whatever it is. So the feeling of the whole thing to me is so interesting. Do you see that with the women that you work with, that when women start really, not only doing less, but also doing more of the things they need more of, that impacts their relationship with money and their spending patterns?
Absolutely. So much so that I've actually built a model on this called the 7 levels of financial consciousness. And so in that first level of unconsciousness, this is where we're just completely head in the sand, letting someone else run it or not running it at all. Mm-hmm. And what I do to get people into this more level of consciousness, and you went through this exercise, is that I actually study your spending habits. And so we do a deep dive. We ask for your credit cards. If you're using a line of credit, we ask for a line of credit, your checking accounts, your savings accounts. We ask for all of it. And we put all of your financial picture in one place, which I know traditional advising doesn't do. And so when we take a look, and it's not to come from a place of judgment or to point fingers or what have you, but what I know to be true is if I said, oh, hey, Wendy, how much do you spend on groceries a week? You'd say, yeah, $400. When I study it, it's $800. How much are you spending on convenience foods? Oh, $50. It's actually $300. And it's not, again, to be in this place of judgmental, but in this place to say, we're going to show you consciously of where you are actually spending. And then I like to run through what I call your value meter. And so I do a similar thing is, okay, what are your core values? And how is this spending analysis that we just showed you, how is it correlating to, as you said, your happiness or getting you towards these values? And 9 times out of 10, people are usually enlightened. They weren't aware. And then they realize, oh my gosh, I'm actually not in alignment. And I'm just trying to fill this void and this hole with buying more stuff. And as you said, like, if you weren't happy before and then you did a kitchen reno, yeah, you may be happy for a couple of weeks or days or what have you, but it's not, you're going to search. People just keep searching for the next thing instead of going inwards. Mm-hmm. And so then we actually get people, like you said, like you had talked about when you did the program, is you run this weekly number and you switch to cash. And when you can physically see and visually see you taking that money out to pay for things, you start to it really starts to hit home. Mm-hmm. Because what we know to be true is when you pull out plastic, you spend 125% more than what you had intended. And then that click or Apple Pay, my daughter actually had Apple Pay on her phone. She's like, Mom, I got to take Apple Pay off because I am becoming so unconscious of my spending with the Apple Pay. Mm-hmm. And so not only do we have this void, but we have big retail and financial institutions making it easier and easier and easier for us to fill that void. And at the same time, send us marketing messages that we are not enough, especially our young girls. I know you have a daughter, I have daughters of the same age. Holy crap. The marketing dollars that are being spent on that age group of you are not enough unless you have. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's always been like that, but I've really see I would never have spent on designer coffees and stuff the way that they are.
Yeah.
And they're getting fed this at an earlier age and getting fed it on their phones of you are not worthy enough unless you have. And so all of a sudden we're actually being told we have a void that we have to fill.
Yeah.
And so it just becomes this big spin, but what we really have to be strong enough, and it's absolutely, like you keep saying, not your fault. You are being bombarded with this. And if your money story, as you said before, comes from your parents and they weren't modeling this, and your peers aren't modeling this, and we both live in Nova Scotia, so our school system is not supporting financial literacy, where the heck do you learn this from?
Right. Well, you don't. And here's the thing. It wasn't taught in school. It wasn't really taught. I'm going to be honest, in law school, like it was not taught. Like we had a financial accounting course, which is just really as you say, the mechanics of it all. And probably the ethics of it. I can't remember exactly what was covered in that course, but it was definitely not anything to do with what we're talking about right now. And I don't know of any curriculum that covers this whole like emotional component of money piece and the spending piece. And as you were talking about social media with the girls, I was thinking, and then like our parents, maybe our parents' money story, I was thinking, geez, our parents could not possibly have prepared us for this. Whatever the money story is we grew up with, it did not factor in social media and the technology changes that have happened since the 80s when we were driving around on our banana seats, with our baskets and our dollar worth of allowance to go buy like Pop Rocks. Yeah. Like we were just in a different situation. I mean, yeah, I was being marketed to, but it was like, Teen Beat magazine once a month or whatever I could afford to buy it. It was like, occasionally the TV shows, I guess, that I was watching and, maybe I guess some ads on the radio or something, but we just did not have, my daughter and your daughters are being bombarded all day, every day by retail. Yep. All day, every day. So how on earth could I, as a parent, have ever prepared my kid for that? That was not my childhood. And that is not my story. Now I'm in it too, right? And I'm not prepared for it either. Like it's affecting me in the same way. And one of the things I'm starting to realize that, a place that we can take some power back around social media and retail is, I am clicking the button of, I do not want to see this anymore all the time. So I'm effectively done with Facebook. I can't stand it. I don't want to be on there anymore. I'm only on there because all of you guys out there are still following me on Facebook. Go follow me on Instagram so I can get off Facebook, please. I don't want to be on it anymore. At Beat Burnout and Booze on Instagram. And then I will ditch that darn Facebook account. I've got 5,000, 5,500 followers on there, but it's all ads all the time on there. And I'm just done with it. It's just self-serving stuff. And Facebook is not functioning for small businesses the way it used to do for me. Anyway, I'm noticing that on Instagram, I am almost every day, at least once, usually several times, clicking, stop sending me this. I'm not interested in this. I don't want to see any more of this. And it's fascinating to me how it will instantly fill that with something else. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's like a never ending fountain of what I need. In the eyes of, can I just remind everyone, some big, old, rich, white guy. Mm-hmm. So one thing you can do to step back into your power around all of this is to start paying attention to the ads that you're seeing. I don't know if people know this, but if you're someone who's changed their relationship with alcohol or who would like to do that, or just generally are sick and tired of seeing all the ads around drinking, you can actually shut that stuff off on Instagram. You can say, I don't want to see any ads related to alcohol anymore. And they do that because they consciously understand that that is a problematic area for women and a trigger, and that their addictions related to that. But interestingly, you can't just shut off all your ads. Even though spending is as big of an addiction for women, totally. Right? Okay, that's it. I'm done my monologue, done my rant. Oh my gosh.
Well, like we said at the beginning, we could talk about this for hours because there are so many parallels.
Yeah, so many. Let's get into some before we wrap up. I want to talk about what women can do. So let's say someone's listening to this podcast and they're thinking, I'm not where I want to be with my relationship with money. Either I'm overspending and I know that, or I actually don't know how much I'm spending. I have no real sense of all of this. If you're like me, maybe, geez, I know we have a plan for the future. I know we have investments. I know we have insurance, but I don't really know the details of that. I don't have a really great understanding of that. And I'd like to know more about that. If you're in any of those places or somewhere else around money and you want to start making some change, like where do women start? What's like one or two first steps?
Absolutely. My first step is always sunlight is the best disinfectant. So bring it out to the sunlight. Yeah. Make a stance that I am not going to bury my head in the sand on this anymore. I am going to bring it out into the sunlight, and then it's not as scary. The second thing is start talking about money, especially with your girlfriends and your daughters. And interestingly, I just had a conversation with a young woman who's just starting her career that reached out to me because she wants to start to become more financially astute. And she was saying, I talk about money with my girlfriends all the time. And we talk about pay and pay equity. This is one of the reasons why women haven't been paid what their male counterparts are, because we just don't talk about it. If you belong to a book club, make one of your books a financial book. And I would suggest starting with The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. The third thing is that you want to get yourself educated, right? Education is always the key. Always. When we learn, that's how we earn. And so again, starting with a book like Lynn's book, and then subscribing, if you like podcasts, subscribe to a podcast like Her Money. I love Her Money. I also like The First 100K. All of those podcasts are designed for women and talk about money in a feminine and money sense. And then really, again, take a deep dive into your spending. I suggest looking at the last 4 months, getting honest with yourself, because we always buy with emotion and then justify with rationale. Really take a look at it and say, okay, what have I spent? And then you really come to this place of consciousness, and then ditch the budget. Budgeting doesn't work. Budgeting is based on economic theory, which says agents, otherwise known as human beings, will make the right decision every single time, rational decision every single time. And I've yet to meet such a human being. I'm not that human being myself. Budget's like diet, right? Those two words automatically put us in this place of scarcity and restriction. So you want to think of building yourself a spending plan. And so saying, okay, I want to spend X amount, do it weekly, not monthly, because the cognitive biases that we have in our brain and the mental math, we just won't hold those big numbers. So you want to chunk it up. I like to chunk it up weekly and then just keep to that. And, if you are going to make a purchase, run it through your value meter. And I'm not sure if you saw my latest blog about my bike that I actually bought on credit, but I ran it through my value meter and decided that, this is something that resonates with all of those values that I have. And I've been having a ball on it, and I'm not spending, and I'm out with my family and all of the rest of it. And so again, really just making sure that you have those values, that you become conscious, that you start talking about, that you get educated. And the only way, money is always the elephant in the room. And there's only one way to eat an elephant, which is one bite at a time. So just taking those steps to becoming more conscious.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. That's so great. As you were chatting, I was thinking about abundance versus deprivation and how that's something I talk about a lot as a coach. When people are trying to make change, this idea of rooting whatever your goals are in what you're going to get instead of what you have to give up. And I could see that applying really directly to what you're talking about. I love that correlation between like diet and budget and how those things are the same, because they really are deprivation based when you're thinking of it that way. So what do you stand to get from stepping into some power in terms of your relationship with alcohol? What might come to you? What abundance might be available to you? And I am not talking about financial abundance, although that may happen. I'm talking about abundance in terms of you actually being able to live that life that you're so desperate to live right now, filling that hole that you have, that we all have, creating that freedom and that opportunity and space for rest and for being. Like, all of those things, in my opinion, are the things that come from doing the hard work now for easy later, right? Like, So this has been such a fascinating conversation, April. I know I have a feeling that I'll have you back to talk about something more, because we had a list of other things we thought we might talk about today. And surprise, surprise, we didn't get to them. Anyway, I hope everyone found this as interesting as I did, and you've got some things to reflect on. As April said, the first step is that awareness piece. It's like, just bring it all out, shine a big fat spotlight on it, get out of shame, get into, just some awareness and mindfulness around it. It is what it is. You can't change it till you know what it is.
That's
right. And then, start doing the work to take some steps to get yourself closer to that life that you crave. And it's not new countertops, guys. That's not what it is. It's something else. And I know how scary it can feel to not know what it is. And I think the same thing goes with April. Like, how uncomfortable it is to not know what the thing is that you need more of. But if you just dig in and keep trying things and keep exploring it, you're going to find it. And it's really great when you get there and you don't feel like you need to escape anymore. Absolutely. It's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, April. Where can people find out more about you? So if people are looking to get some more information on you and what you do, where should they go?
Absolutely. Well, you can always go to my website, which is April Stroink, STROINK, .ca. And I am like you, I am not spending time on Facebook, and over on Instagram as well under April Stroink.
Awesome. Okay. Can't thank you enough. Everybody have a wonderful day, and I will see you back here next week.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a burnout and balance coach, I help busy high achievers like you create a more balanced, joyful life. If you've been putting yourself last for way too long and are worried that you're burning out, grab your free burnout checklist at www.wendymccallum.com/checklist. That's www.wendymccallum.com/checklist.